Thank you for sharing. And just by sharing the way you did is an act of self-love. Coming here this evening is an act of self-love. Every step you make to try and discover yourself is an act of self-love. Sometimes it's these little things we do, without even realizing we're doing it, which are acts of self-love. Love is a verb. We discover love in the action, in the movement. So you're already loving yourself. Some traditions say the path to self-discovery is the highest form of love. It's not one of my concepts, but if it's useful for you, this is what you're doing right now. Wanting to find out why this is happening, why this is loving yourself already. We get confused not only by the word love, but by the feeling love. We have an experience from somewhere in our life connected to a belief of what love is. So we keep measuring everything we meet against that belief and experience. But love is not that. Love is not that. That's the belief and the feeling of love, the emotion love. You might want that as well, but I sense that you want something greater than just the belief and the feeling of love. And that's what I'm saying is self-discovery, self-realization. Self-knowing is, I think, I feel what you really want. And that is much greater, or it's less, depending on the way we look at it, than the feeling or the belief in love. It's difficult for the mind ego to let go of the idea of what love is. Yeah? Because it's so much part of our conditioning for thousands of years. Yeah? All the songs, not all, but many of the songs, many of the movies, the literature, the poems, even the spiritual teachings, emphasize this feeling, belief, love. So we're brainwashed, we're conditioned to go searching for that. And when we find it's not permanent, we wonder why. Why is it not permanent? Because it's not that, what love is. Love is your breath, right now. Love is touching your face. Love is your hair growing, blinking, your heart beating. Love is sitting next to the other person. Love is seeing the light or the darkness. Love is experiencing pain. Love is experiencing pleasure. Everything that's happening is love. So love is not a feeling or a word. Love is the total expression of life. Always the total expression of life. That's what love is. And you're never separate from that, even if you think you are. And if the part of your knowing is not here, that's okay. If it's not the heart, that's okay. Your knee knows, or your elbow, or just one of your hairs. Because the knowing is not located, actually. I talk about it as if it's the heart, or the knee, or the hair, but it's not. It's always here, present, the knowing. The knowing is what we are. So the mind thinks, I have to do something to get to the knowing, to understand the knowing. I have to do something for the knowing to be revealed. I have to do something for self-realization to happen, for enlightenment to happen. But there's nothing we can do because we've never been anything else. We've always been life, love, consciousness, God, whatever you want to call it. The emotion and the belief love might have some energetic, physical blockages or other things, which we can look at in a different way. And this weekend we'll do some exercises about the relationship with our parents, the inner child. We'll use different affirmations, things like that, because it's useful at what I call the relative level to clean this up a little bit, tidy it up, unblock it. And then this understanding, which is always here, not here, It's always here. This understanding shines brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. So we start living from this understanding. We start living from this knowing. More. We're already living from this knowing. Consciousness is already doing all this. God is already all this. Yes? Yes? The universe is already all this. Yes? But the mind ego doesn't want to accept that the bad things, the ugly things, the hateful things, the destructive things are God, consciousness. So there's this internal battle between our conditioning, our education, and the knowing that's always here. And the sick joke, and it's a really sick joke, is that even this battle, this conflict, this duality is also consciousness, is also God. Does that make sense? And the reason it makes sense, if I may suggest, is because you already know it. Otherwise it couldn't make sense. Does that make sense? How do you feel? How do you feel right now? Wonderful. And if you then feel worse, and if you remember, feeling worse is also God consciousness, is also what I am, then this conflict starts to change. And we're not rejecting this part just to have this part. We start to understand that all of it is what I am. But naturally, because of our conditioning, education, I don't like this part. So we accept we don't like it. But we know we are all of it. The preferences will still remain with this understanding shining more and more and more, with this knowing shining more and more and more. That's why in some spiritual traditions it's called the light, because it feels like there's something coming out, shining, wanting to burst out. Yeah. So instead of using the word love, if we use the word light, then any moment during your day, even if it's just for a few seconds, you know the light that you are. You know the light that you are, don't you? Yes. It might be a few seconds which you don't recognize. And we look at that, the way the mind functions. But these few seconds, the spaces between thoughts, as I call them, the light is already there. When we don't have a thought, something's wrong with me, or any other thought, there's just space. There's light. There's presence. There's beingness. Yes? So when the mind ego gets familiar with that, this is why I say it's changing the conditioning. You keep hearing, hearing, hearing. You're already consciousness. You're already God. You're already perfect. You're already what you're looking for. Suddenly or gradually, your mind ego starts to understand this and believe it. What time is it? So I just want to check. It's 9:07. 5 minutes, or shall we stop now? Does anybody else have something to share? I want to share that there's a spider coming towards me. See, if we take what Jesus said, love thy neighbor as yourself. I don't know what it is in Romanian. Yeah, love thy neighbor. Thank you. When I used to hear that, I was very frustrated because I didn't love my neighbor. I had conflicts with most of my neighbors, including my family members, including myself. So I was going to say the F word, but I won't. How the hell can I love my neighbor? I I didn't understand Jesus' instruction. Until later in life, it occurred to me, well, what if I love myself more? No, that's too difficult. Okay, what if I try and understand myself more? Yeah, it feels a bit like homework, but okay, I'll try. So I went to therapy and I did meditation, everything. And then I started to understand myself more. The body, the mechanisms, the mind, whatever. And then I realized, oh wow, maybe this is what Jesus is talking about. This is a form of self-love. I'm focusing on myself. Everybody said you're crazy to go for therapy because I was a reasonably successful architect. I had a fairly healthy relationship. I had a nice house and a car. The car wasn't so nice. It was 4 different colors because I could never afford to paint the whole car. So I used to paint patches of the car, and they didn't have the original blue of the car. So it had 4 different blues on it. But I liked it. And it was like a statement that I was a rebel. So I'd turn up at 5-star hotels in this nice car, and I'd go to very posh parties, and I'd even meet ministers, and I think once I even drove to meet the president in this car, which looked a mess. But it was an act of self-love, you see. But then I thought, okay, all this learning and self-discovery, people telling me I shouldn't do this, maybe that's exactly what I need to do. So that's what I did. And then I started to feel better about myself, and I realized that's what Jesus was saying. Love yourself, and then you can love your neighbor. So why didn't he say that clearly in the beginning? So simple, isn't it? The more we fill ourselves up with love, self-knowing, self-discovery, self-acceptance, self-listening, self-recognition, even self-touching, self-caressing, whatever it is, self-kissing, we fill ourselves up with all these things. And logically, we have more to give, don't we? It's called being selfish, but if your self-loving is not harming anybody, it's not selfish, it's self-love. Self-giving is not selfish. Self-giving is self-love. I'm waiting to meet Jesus because I think there's a lot to be said if he could have just said it a different way. But of course, he said it like that. And people didn't understand what he was saying, so they turned it and twisted it from their experience, you see. And that's what happens with all the major religions and all the major spiritual teachings. After the teacher is dead, sometimes hundreds of years later, then we have a different message. So we keep checking it. Check it, check it, check it for yourself. Check it, check it, check it. That's why I like sharing these exercises, so that we can check for ourselves. Listening to the words is good, but check for yourself, check for yourself, check for yourself. And then it becomes very simple, very clear. So, just before we leave, please change seats one more time. Everybody. Don't feel obliged to, I have to say. So imagine the room is life. And all these objects are the people we know, friends and family, the people we love. Unfortunately, the people we don't like as well. Maybe the people we hate. But this is life, this room. And there's our work here, all the things we like in our life. So we haven't left life. We haven't left the things we love. That's the important thing to understand. This understanding, this realization doesn't take away life. But now you're sitting as your true self. You're sitting here as consciousness, God, the totality of the universe, love, whatever you want. You're sitting here as peace, you're sitting here as happiness. This is your seat. You have every right to this seat. This is your birthright, this seat. This experience of your life is your birthright. So we live the rest of our life knowing this is what we are. Now in that sense, there's nothing to fear, is there? We haven't lost anything, maybe. We haven't had any major change of body or clothes. I got a bit fatter along the way, but that might have happened anyway. Or maybe it wouldn't have. Maybe I would have got thinner. We don't know. But can you see? If this internal knowing shines, if you know you are God, the universe, life, consciousness, you've always been. You're infinite and eternal. Even though it's a big thing, you're also this body, emotions, energies, preferences, likes, dislikes. You're also this knowledge, this experience. Now if you were to live your life from this moment on, clearly with this knowing, shining, shining, shining every day of your life, you can see the potential, can't you? You can see the potential for your life to be different. We don't know if it's going to happen or not, but that's the potential that's here. To live life without the fears that are keeping this handbrake on.